is the bees and how they react. So later on, we'll go into the hive and we can show you females, males. We can show you the queen. We can show you the whole life cycle that's happening in this hive and this hive and this hive. These are 3 hives right here. This is a 4th, and over here is a 5th. In each box, there's a queen, and that queen is the mother of the colony. The colony works together in a social construct to collect food, water, and other resources, all for the betterment of this individual colony. So, as I said earlier, all of these boxes have their own queens. All of these queens are different bees, and they have different adaptations, right? They have different skills, and all together, they do a pretty good job figuring out what needs to be collected, who needs to be fed, where the queen is, and what else is going on outside weather-wise, so they can work together as a colony to live to next year.
Cool.
Nice.
Ooh.
Oh.
Oh, I've gone. So Spencer, what is it? What made you get into this? How did you start to learn about bees?
Yeah, I was always taken back by nature and just her raw beauty. There's a lot of great things out there, and all you need to do is have the patience to look at it and try to understand it. And like bees and other animals, they'll tell you everything else that you need to know just by observing. I let them work. So when I was young, I had a swarm that came onto my property, and I figured out what to do by research, reading. But by the time I went back out to get the bees, they were gone. And that was a realization that, they're a wild animal, right? They need things, and they're looking for things. So they're constantly moving, just like everything else around us. So it just brings a lot of humility to know that you're doing something good for the environment and everything else.
So we in our class, we've been recently talking about pollinators, and we've been learning the life cycle of flowering plants. Could you maybe speak to the role of bees in that?
Love to. Yeah, great question. Thank you, Ms. Brown. So what happens is there's over 20,000 species of bees in the world. That's a lot of species. That's a lot of types of bees. And there's even more types of flowers. There's lots of flowers that are wind pollinated, where they need the wind to blow their reproductive cycles off of their plant and onto another plant. That's a wind-based mechanism. And bees and other pollinators like butterflies, flies, moths, obviously bees, bumblebees, you name it, even some birds, they're pollinators. So what they'll do, they will mechanize pollination from one tree with many flowers to another tree with many flowers. And I say tree, but this can be plant, shrub, grasses, you name it, fruit trees. It's all happening thanks to the pollinators. They're the commitment. So what happens is the trees grow. They use the sun to create photosynthesis. They create those sugars, and they'll put those sugars into the ground for an exchange of other minerals. And those minerals will be picked up along with the sugars, carbohydrates, and shot into the leaves. And as a natural reproductive cycle of trees, they'll produce flowers, and these flowers will go to seed. But that mechanization from flower to seed is only possible either by wind pollination or by pollinators. And bees play a major role in pollination, making that happen, making that mechanism work from flower to seed. And that's the real wonder, because these are social animals. So right now, these colonies are different sizes because of the different genetics, but generally there'll be 15 to 20,000 bees in the hives right now. And that's a social animal working together. So imagine 15, 30,000 of your friends working together at something and accomplishing it. It goes to great lengths to what you can do to working together. So in the peak of summertime, which is September, these hives can number up to 60,000. Um, and that's a natural life cycle of these pollinators. Unfortunately, they don't live that long. They may live for a month or two, sometimes less, depending on disease and other viral pressures. It's a dog eat dog world out there for many pollinators and many animals in the animal kingdom. That's just the reality. So the more advantages we can give them to be a better bee, you can ask me what that is later. But the more advantages we can give them to be a better bee and work as a social organism, the better we'll be for food security and other plant mechanisms that depends on pollination. So there's lots of other pollinators out there. Don't get me wrong. People ask me how we can help the bees. I don't say to have a beehive. I say plant some trees and flowers. That's the best way to help the bees and other pollinators.
Great.
Thank you.
It's kind of like a trade-off, isn't it? We're bribing them with our plants and flowers to do what they have to do.
Exactly. It's a good trade-off because plants are very important and the pollinators are very important for our own needs for growing food at the high density that we need it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so shall we have a little look? Shall we learn a little bit about what's in there?
Yeah, sure. That's why we're here, right? So first, I always like to explain a bit about bees. Bees are social animals, and they have protocols and even hierarchies within each colony. Some colonies, the queen may be a nice queen. Other colonies, the queen is not so nice.
You're pointing to those like those two have a nice and a not nice one. Is that the case?
Yeah, that is the case. And when I mean not nice, I just mean her lineage has a tendency to be a little bit more aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
and that's always a precaution. So one of my precautions is using a safety tool. My first safety tool I use is my beekeeping suit. The second is my smoker. So bees communicate in three ways. In my opinion, vibration, scent using pheromones, and visual acuities. So they can see something. So they can see silhouettes, shapes, colors. White is to cover my silhouette. The smoke is to cover my pheromones. And since this is also a social colony, they definitely have pheromones of themselves, and the smoke will help mask that. And third, the smoke will also sting their eyes slightly, and that will make them want to gorge on honey.
Is it right that bees don't have very good eyesight?
Bees actually have 5 eyes.
Ah.
Yeah. They have pretty good eyesight. We'll get into that later, but yeah, they can see you, and if they want to sting you, they'd sting you. So the best thing to do is either to have safety equipment or just give the bees their space. That's the things I want to stress. So the entrance is on the other side because I'm always cautious about my hive entrance. So I'm just gonna put smoke in the entrance. Okay, you don't need much. So this is just the outer cover. This is the weatherproofing. People Bermuda's weather out. In Bermuda, it gets pretty hot. So a nice box that can insulate very well is very beneficial. So what I've just done, I've taken the top box and I put it on the ground. That's safe. That's not going to fall over. I'm not going to kill any bees. Unfortunately, it's out of the view of the site, but all it is an empty box with frames in it. This is a Langstroth style hive. So there's 10 frames in this box, and each frames fit, and they create something called a bee space. This bee space is very important. You can probably see it.
Ooh.
That's the top of the box. This is the bottom. There's a couple bees in here, but because it's still early on in the season, the bees are slightly lower down in this box. This box is where the entrance is. This is the brood chamber. This is where the queen is rearing young. Well, the queen is laying eggs, and the workers and the nurse bees are rearing young bees. So this is where it's all happening. So these bees are acting very nice and calm. It's a beautiful day in Bermuda, so why wouldn't they be? So before I go in, I definitely want to smoke the bees down a bit. All right, so I'm going to pull this frame out very slowly.
Wow.
All right, so this is just a frame. Get in the sun. Can we see this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a good frame of bees. There's lots of birth happening here.
Cool. Wow.
I don't know if you can tell, but this is a male bee. Male bees can't sting. They don't have a stinger.
I didn't know that.
Yep, male bees don't sting. They don't do any work within the hive. The social organism here is a female dominant organism, social construct, if you will, and it's pretty cool. So come winter time, all the males will be kicked out,
Okay.
starved or died, and then the females with the queen will take the bees through winter. And this is the life cycle of Apis mellifera.
So is that an adaptation so that the cycle can carry on in that hive?
Yes, for this animal, these animals, bees have been around for 250 million years. That's like a quarter billion years. That's a pretty long time to be alive and figure out how best to serve your environment, right? Apis mellifera has been around for around 80 million. And that's because most bees, here in Bermuda, we have 4 types of bees. We have our introduced European honeybee, Apis mellifera. And we also have a solitary leafcutter bee. They basically have burrows in rocks and or wood, and they'll cut leaves out in a cylindrical form and lay an egg in it. Pack pollen. Pollen is food for bees. I'll get a pollen frame out now. It's absolutely gorgeous. Pollen, of course, is trees, comes from the trees, and the bees use the pollen as a protein source. So when it's tons of food outside, because trees are flowering, you'll have an increase of a surge in bee population because the social organism is going to collect that excess tree pollen that's being created. The bees will collect it and turn it into bee pollen, bee bread.
Ah.
They'll use that protein source. Yeah, they make their own bread. They'll use that protein source as a food to rear their young ones. is really important because most of the bee's life is in its gestation and nursing. Yeah, that's where it learns all its communication.
Wow.
So right now, these bees are using up all the pollen as they bring it in. Yeah.
So how do they use it? What are they doing?
They're collecting pollen from trees and packing it in on their legs. This is not a pollen frame. And then they'll gather this pollen and then put it inside these cells.
Right.
They're all cells, 4.9 millimeter. They're tiny cells. They're. I don't know if you see the hexagon cells. Is the light hitting it at the right angle?
We can't quite see it, but I guess like if anyone's ever seen honeycomb that you eat, it looks like that. Right?
Yeah, this telephone pole. The light just came around. Is that better?
Yeah.
So do you see the small hexagons?
Wait, no. I did a second ago, slightly.
Well, this entire frame, this wooden frame is made up of beeswax, and this beeswax are basically hexagons, and that's where the queen lays the egg in these hexagons. And over 3 weeks, a baby bee will go through its gestation. The larvae will hatch out of the egg. The nurse bees will have pollen ready in cells nearby. They'll eat that pollen, digest it in their gut, regurgitate it, and feed it to the larvae.
Wow.
It will scooch around in the cell, in all these cells. Mind you, a queen can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day.
Wow.
So that can really be explosive. So pollen coming into the hive can feed a lot of larvae, a lot of eggs. And over 21 days, that larvae eats all that food that the bees give them. And then on day 14, it stands up because it's so big and so fat. And when it stands up, the bees cap it over with a layer of wax. And on the 21st day of that larvae's life, it will hatch out of the enclosed cell and be greeted to the world. For the first time, it will be born as a nurse bee. And from there, it'll spend a couple weeks of its life communicating and feeding other bees and figuring out what these pheromones really mean. This frame inside this hive, it's pitch black.
Right.
They don't know what things look like when they're born into the world for the first couple of weeks. That because Apis mellifera chooses to live in a cavity, right? Really cool fact. But they can live other places. They can be pretty hardy, but generally they love nice
Somewhere
cabin.
dark.
Yeah, dark, cool, and airy. So back to what I was saying. During that egg and larvae's gestation cycle, this brood chamber it's a chamber. It rears brood like a factory. Basically, it hires workers and fires them. And when it fires them, it pushes them off to do other work, like go get pollen. Right. So that the bees that collect pollen and nectar are actually older adult bees. Those bees that you see on flowers won't hurt you. They're just pollinators trying to find food to bring back to the hive. right? If you see bees around a hive or in a tree, that's a colony. You do not want to go around that hive or colony. You want to leave them alone, give them their space. Um, so, with saying that, with bees on the flower, they're really happy. They've prepared all their lives to go do that very thing, visit flower to flower. Um, and it's really awesome to see bees doing that. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That'd be cool if you can find a couple trees that are in bloom. Right now, the trees that are in bloom are spice trees. Um, in another month and a half, bay grape and fiddlewood will be in flower. Pigeon berries are in flower right now. Pittosporums, viburnums. There's a few trees in flowers. A couple avocados are in flower. Citrus trees are in flower. And those are the trees. There's lots of vines that are in flower right now. Gorgeous trees. But you see how many bees are on this frame?
Yeah, tons.
Tons. And this is what it takes to drive a colony. This is what it takes. It takes thousands of bees to, one, moderate the temperature inside this box, inside this cavity. This gestation that's happening right here on this frame and all the other frames that are in there on the lower box, that needs to be kept at a constant temperature of 87 degrees.
Okay.
So when
if
it's
there's not enough bees, that has a risk of not working then.
it definitely has a risk of not working. Luckily, there's a 3-week window. So when the temperature drops drastically, that's not good. When the temperature drops evenly and the size of the cluster can moderate that temperature and humidity, and that's okay. But when it's saying that, when it's middle of wintertime here in Bermuda, when it's 50 degrees and it's blowing 60 knots, these bees really do have a hard time generating that heat.
Right.
If there's not enough food resources. Because do you know how bees generate heat?
How?
Where they cluster together like this, and it's body heat, right? These bees are little machines. They consume nectar, and their bodies create energy, and that creates heat. They'll flap their little wings to draw in moisture, to draw in air, to have a nice controlled airflow. So they're really amazing. They can generate their own heat and cool their hive by creating a vacuum with their wings. It's pretty neat stuff.
It's amazing they have a sense for those changes as they happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of scientists. Bees are the most studied animal in the world. There's more studies done on bees than any other animal in the world. And yet our bee population is crashing at an alarming rate. And that's not just our honeybees. That's a lot of wild bees, a lot of solitary bees, like the other two bees we have here. We have a red wasp. It's a paper wasp, but then we have a black and yellow mud wasp. Right? These are the other two solitary bees. When I say solitary, they may have small colonies of 15 over winter.
Nothing like that.
Yeah, nothing, the thousands that are happening here. So I'm going to pack up this hive. If we want, we can go through some questions.
Yeah.
Because the reason why I pack up this hive because it's a little chilly out today, and it's definitely not 87 degrees.
So you don't want them to be cooling down too quickly.
Right. So it's all about moderation and checking, and finding your answer and moving on. In Bermuda, I have in the peak of summertime, I can have upwards of 300 hives across the island.
Wow. So where do you, is that in people's gardens then? Is it if people come across a bee hive and you kind of can transplant it?
Yeah. So a swarm would be the phrase, the word. Yeah. So a beehive would swarm um, onto your property or someone's property. They'd call me. I'd come remove the swarm and give it a home, a box, and I'll put it somewhere where I can maintain it relatively easy. And I have upwards of regularly 150 hives from Somerset to St. George's. So yeah, they are in people's homes, well, on people's properties, adjacent to their homes. I have hive contract. I have hives with Hamilton Princess and a couple other hotels that want to support bees in our local population. There's a lot of positivity. You'd be surprised how many people care about our local bee population because, like I said, that mechanism of flowering to seed happens with pollination. There are flies and other butterflies that do it, but the amount of animals that are reliant on that mechanism to work is really important. And that's why bees have been so important for humans and other animals, because they create the seeds that are eaten by birds, by other animals, you name it. And that's also the seeds to germinate next year.
Right.
If there's a bad hurricane, we need seeds that are in the ground germinating, that once all the trees get knocked down, there's sunlight on the soil, and those trees can sprout, germinate, and grow, and be the next succession. So Bermuda is not a desolate island, or any other country.
Yeah.
Of pollinators, and why they're important. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up to some of the kids. If you've got a question, you can put up your hand, and if I call your name, you can unmute yourself and ask it. Priya, I see you straight away. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I see. I got it. Okay. So you asked my question when you was you answered my question when you was talking about it. I asked how many bees do you think that in a hive, but then you told me which is like
how many bees?
60,000, something like that. 60,000.
That's a great question. Thank you. Upwards of 60,000, but bees are social animals, and they expand and contract dependent on the time of year and the food that's available. Right? So in the wintertime, bees, most of my hives are 15,000 bees. Some of them will drop right down to 5,000 bees per colony. And others may just die, unfortunately, because it is a survival of the fittest. And this is a natural world.
Okay, Zach.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Zach. You're muted. I unmuted you. Go ahead.
What would happen if a queen bee died? And if it did, and how long do they live for?
So what would happen if a queen bee died, and how long do they live for?
Nice, guys. All you guys are paying attention. I'm loving it. So you're engaged. It's awesome. So that's a superb question. So each of these hives will have a queen, and a natural succession of queen bee to queen bee happens by reproduction. So a queen bee will swarm off with half of the population to create a new hive. They'll be looking for a new cavity. And if that lands on your property, you call me up. I'll come there, take the bees away, give you a bottle of Bermuda honey, and I'll say, thank you, you've done your part. And I'll put them into another box. But the existing colony still has to raise a new queen. So how does that happen? That's a great question. So each colony knows when and what each queen's doing. So a queen can live up to 4 years. The typical bee may only live a season, or not even a season, which is 2 to 3 months, so 30 to 60 days. Some bees can live a little longer, 6 months, depending if they're overwintering. Bees that overwinter need to build up the pollen resources to feed to the gestating young, the larvae, to be able to have that expansion in population. So they get used and really their wings will have holes in them because they're just flying everywhere, miles and miles and miles a day, just for the betterment of the hive. So with that being said, a queen can live up to 4 years. Her job is just to lay eggs when it's necessary, and govern the hive. So that takes a lot of work and stress on her. So that's pretty much dependent on pheromones. So the queen will release pheromones, and the bees will pick up these pheromones. And if these pheromones aren't strong enough and picked up by the members of the hive, if she has weak pheromones, they'll actually kill the queen. Or
Basically has to be very stinky.
a very floral.
Yeah.
There's all that flowers coming in there. She needs to be doing a good job in creating that energy. And pheromones are the key ways to do that. And those pheromones are all dependent on how many eggs she's laying, because those eggs release pheromones as well. So it's all connected. And as long as you let that balance work, it'll be great. So with that being said, any egg between 1 and 3 days old can become a queen. Once an egg or larvae has passed the 3-day-old mark, it can no longer become a queen because its dietary needs during the larvae is very specific to become a queen. And that is the choice being fed on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd day of that larvae. A queen's gestation cycle isn't 21 days, it's 14 days. They have a shorter gestation cycle, and they're fed a strict diet of royal jelly. This royal jelly is super important for the creations of those pheromones within that queen. So once that begins to fail, the pheromones will be displaced, and the bees will sense that. So they'll feed royal jelly to several of eggs and larvae between 1 and 3 days old. And that process is called supersedure. They'll supersede that queen with a new queen. And sometimes that queen, is nothing wrong with her. She just chooses to want to go through that process of swarming. It's an 80 million year long process. I am not in control of that. I just observe it, and I do a pretty good job. That's part of my job as a beekeeper. It's probably all our jobs as beekeepers. But yeah, it's a pretty cool question. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to another person. I see we're running out of time a little bit, but I see Jacob has his hand up. Go ahead, Jacob.
Have you ever seen bees fight amongst themselves? Like fight each other?
Like within the hive?
Yeah.
Yeah. Bees fight. Boy, do they fight. When resources become scarce, they have a tendency to fight. And bees can definitely die in that. Bees can sting bees several times and inject bee venom, and those bees won't die that are injecting. If a bee gets injected several times, it will eventually die. That's just how it goes. And that's what fighting really is. They'll spin around. It's pretty gruesome to watch because it just won't happen in the 1s and 2s. It happens in the hundreds.
Oh, that's sad. Yeah.
Yeah. So you definitely want to be careful what you're doing, and that's why having bees on your property is no joke. And that would be coming to a robbing frenzy, a feeding frenzy. And that's what typically is a response to. A hive knocks over or whatever, ants displace this hive. A lot of things eat bees because they have a short lifespan. This is one of the great blessings of them. They have a short lifespan, so bees will die, decompose in the soil, right? Or they'll be eaten up by birds, frogs, lizards, toads, spiders, you name it. They're all food for bees. Ants, slugs, when they go on the ground, they're full of great stuff. Sugars and proteins, the building blocks of life.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with that. But yeah, bees do fight, and it's all dependent on weather and situation.
Stressors. Kayuri, go ahead.
How many times does he get stung?
Oh,
Or
thanks.
is he like used to it?
Someone who cares. Thank you. Sometimes when I go through all of my hives in the peak of summertime when the population is really large, I can get stung sometimes up to 50 to 100 times a day.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not a job for everyone. I don't wear gloves. I highly recommend wearing gloves, but unfortunately what I do at the pace I do it and the restraints I have with time, it slows me down. So I don't wear gloves. And I do just fine. And really 50 stings out of maybe 80 hives in a day, it's not too bad. It's one sting here or there every other hive, just to let you know they care. Yeah.
Okay. Nasri, go ahead. We're running out of time, so quick. I can see it saying we only have 1 minute. Go. I can't hear him.
How long can a hive nest last?
How long do they last, the hive?
Yeah.
Before like all the bees die and then they move on to make a different nest.
Yeah. So